What we're going to do next is actually take some questions. And I remember one of my favorite things about Charlie, not that there aren't going to be some questioners who agree with me, but if you disagree with me, I would ask that you come to the front of the line, because we want to talk to people we agree with. We also want to hear from people we disagree with. It is hard for me to see because the spotlights are very bright, but whoever's in line, go ahead and ask your question. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I can see you. How you doing?
Hi, Mr. Vice President. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Lucy.
And I'm Ellie, and we're with the Turning Point chapter for this question.
Thank you, guys.
Yes. Can you tell us how your faith helps you in your role as Vice President?
Well, I appreciate that. That is a very good question. And this is another way in which Charlie has affected my life. I would say that I grew up, again, in a generation where even if people had very deep personal faith, they didn't talk about their faith a whole lot. And I grew up in a country where you just didn't hear political leaders talk about their faith. But the reason why I try to be the best husband I can be, the best father I can be, the reason why I care so much about all the issues that we're going to talk about is because I believe that I've been placed in this position for a brief period of time to do the most amount of good for God and for the country that I love so much. And that's the most important way that my faith influences me. Is we all get a limited opportunity to make a difference. And if you believe as we believe, you believe that God, you believe that Jesus Christ has a plan. And sometimes we don't understand that plan. By the way, one way I don't understand that plan is why my friend lost his life 6 weeks ago. Sometimes I get pissed off about that. But what I remind myself is that there is a deeper rhythm, that Jesus Christ is the author of the fate of human history, and we are charged to do everything that we can to effectuate that vision, to make our country a more virtuous place, a more prosperous place where people can raise a family and not be persecuted for their faith, but teach their children their faith. That recognition that all of us have a duty. And I have two very important duties as Vice President of the United States, to the American people and to God, and that's the most important influence my faith has on me. Thank you.
I understand your view on illegal immigration is it should be a top priority, strengthening our southern borders and fighting the massive drug trafficking that's taken place while securing jobs for the working class Americans. Also, deporting every single person who's invaded our country illegally, which I 100% agree on. My question to you is, what is your view on legal immigration? Personally, I have a girlfriend who's studying in America off a visa. Our hope is eventually getting a green card. So what is your view on legal immigration? Should we reduce it? Also, what is your plan for a merit-based system?
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate the question. And look, my honest view is that right now, America, thanks in part to the Biden border invasion, but also thanks in part to a lot of bad immigration policy, right now we have let in too many immigrants into the United States of America. That is just a fundamental reality. Now, look, legal immigration is complicated because we let in about 1 million legal immigrants into the United States of America every single year. And I think the evidence is pretty clear that a lot of those immigrants are actually undercutting the wages of American workers. It's one of the reasons why the President of the United States, and a lot of us in the administration have encouraged H-1B reform, because if you look at the H-1B visa, what it's supposed to be is that you have a super genius who's studying at an American university, who's working at a great company. You want that super genius to stay in the United States of America and not go somewhere else. What it's actually used to do is hire an accountant at a 50% discount to an American citizen. I don't think that we should be hiring accountants from foreign countries when we've got accountants right here in the United States that would love to work for a good wage. Now, you asked about, I think, your girlfriend, you said, and I obviously don't know the full details about your situation, but my view is, look, there are people who want to come to the United States of America, and some of them, I'm sure, can enrich the United States of America by coming here, but we have got to get our overall numbers way, way down. Too many people have come into the United States of America. I am married to the daughter of immigrants who came to the United States in the 1980s. I do believe that some immigrants, many immigrants do in fact enrich the United States of America. But here's the problem. We don't even know how many illegal aliens we have. We don't even know. The best guess is probably 25, 30 million people. I've heard estimates as high as 50 million. When something like that happens, you've got to allow your own society to cohere a little bit, to build a sense of common identity, for all the newcomers to assimilate, the ones who are going to stay, to assimilate into American culture. Until you do that, you've got to be careful about any additional immigration, in my view. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a question about Israel and Trump's policy towards it. Do you think it's a conflict of interest for Miriam Adelson, an Israeli donor, to give millions of dollars to his campaign and then Trump have pro-Israeli policies?
Well, if you're asking, do I think the President of the United States has a conflict of interest? No, I do not, because I know how the President of the United States makes his decisions, and I see it behind the scenes. Now, as the President himself has said, Miriam Adelson, who, by the way, I know, and I have a very good relationship with her, she is very clear about the fact. She doesn't hide the fact that she really loves Israel, and that is part of what motivates her political giving. That is a reality. At the same time, the President of the United States is America first through and through. And let me give you just a couple of examples of this. Number one, we have heard from some pro-Israel voices, some people who really love the state of Israel, that they don't want us to have a relationship with certain Middle Eastern countries. Well, the president, his attitude is, we need to build relationships with any country where we have shared interests, and he's going to do it if it's in the interests of the American people, and he's done exactly that. Number two, there were people, and I remember this criticism of the President of the United States, I just raised it in the context of a conversation I had with Charlie. I remember when people said that the President of the United States was going to get us into a multi-100,000 troop regime change war for Israel. This was 4 months ago. This was 6 months ago. Now, the people who accused the President of the United States of wanting to get us into a regime change war for Israel, I wonder if they stepped back and said, you know what, we were wrong about that, because the President of the United States did not want to get us into a regime change war for any other country. He wanted to knock out a nuclear facility and get everybody back home, and that's exactly what he did. So I understand there's some frustrations out there, but I think the President of the United States, more than any president of my lifetime, is willing to stand up to anybody if he thinks it puts the interests of the American people first. Thank you.
Hello, Vice President Vance.
How you doing?
Good. I have a question. Do you condone large private corporations such as Palantir hoarding data caches on U.S. citizens?
No, I don't condone it. And here's the thing. So I get asked about Palantir a lot because there's this internet meme out there that somehow I am super in bed with Palantir. And here's the thing that I'd say about this. Palantir is a private company. They sometimes do a useful service, and sometimes they're going to do things that we don't like. You should be demanding that your representatives do two things when it comes to Palantir or when it comes to any other technology company. Number one, protecting your data. What's going on with artificial intelligence is going to mean that there are massive inducements to steal your data, to harvest it, and to use it against you to sell digital advertisements. That is not what I believe in, and I've been fighting against it, whether it's Palantir or any other technology company, literally before I ran for office. When I ran for office, I was criticized by Republicans in my Republican Senate primary because I was talking then about Google and Facebook harvesting our data. It's unacceptable. I don't care who does it. I don't want them to do it. Number two, and this is also very important, what's going on with artificial intelligence, we got to be worried about large-scale surveillance, okay? Everything. You asked about Palantir. Do you know that every time you make a credit card transaction, the credit card companies are collecting data on how you spend your money? Do you know that every time you linger over a link on the internet for more than a half second, the search engines are collecting data on you so that they can sell you advertisements? One of the biggest questions for American policy over the next 10 years is how to ensure that you are a sovereign citizen. And you cannot be a sovereign citizen if any private corporation or any government can steal something from you that belongs to you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President J.D. Vance, good evening.
Thank you.
My question is, the Republican Party, they stand for the right to bear arms. A lot of things the founding fathers really made a priority.
Sure.
And I feel as if requiring Christianity in public schools goes against the Founding Fathers' wish of freedom of religion. What do you think about that?
Well, I guess, who is saying that we require Christianity in public schools?
Just from what I've seen on the media and the news, it seems like the Trump administration had wanted to make praying in schools and Christian values incorporated.
Well, look, I think Christian values are a good thing, and I'll talk to you about why I think that's a good thing. But that's separate from forcing people to pray, which I don't think that anybody, certainly no Christian that I know, would ever support or ever endorse. And let me just say something generally about all the people. I see there's a big line, and I hope I can get to everybody's question. I remember when I was a sophomore in high school, I went to an event at my church, which was a book signing with Oliver North and Sean Hannity, the Fox News host. And this was back before, this was, I guess, 25 years ago. And so neither of these guys was maybe as big as they are today. And I remember standing in line, and I'm about to say hello to Oliver North and Sean Hannity. And I remember thinking to myself, I was so nervous. All I need to do is shake their hand, give them a firm handshake, and tell them my name. That's what I'm thinking. Firm handshake, tell them my name. Firm handshake, tell them my name. And I get to the front of the line, and Sean Hannity looks at me, and he says, "How are you doing?" And I totally panic, and I go, JD. Because I had rehearsed shaking and saying my name. My point is, I admire your guys' courage, and please don't be nervous. If you need to work through a question, think about it, speak it. We're all here to have a nice conversation, and we're all supportive of it. Here's the thing when you talk about forcing, I'm going to answer your question, forcing Christianity, forcing people to pray. There's a liberal idea out there that I think is wrong, and that's that liberalism is the source of freedom of religion. And actually, if you go back to the original founding documents of the United States of America, if you go back to the Anglo legal tradition well before there was ever a United States of America, what you find is that freedom of religion is actually a Christian concept. And the reason it's a Christian concept is very simple. Because Christianity, Imago Dei, the idea that we are all made in the image of our Creator, means that we must respect the free will of every single person. Now, part of that is you have a conversation with people. Having free will doesn't mean that you're not allowed to encourage somebody, that you're not allowed to talk to somebody about your faith, that you're not allowed to talk about certain values in school. When our founders talked about freedom of religion, they didn't mean you weren't allowed to say a Christian prayer in a public school or that you weren't allowed to talk about Jesus Christ in a public forum. They just meant that nobody could force you to profess the Christian faith. That had to come from your own free will. And I believe that, and I think every Christian who I've ever spoken to believes that the source is the Christian, the source of your faith, the Christian understanding must be your own free will. But here's the thing about Christian values. There are a lot of Christian values out there that I think that we've just sort of assumed and we've in fact taken for granted. Christian values are the idea that you should respect every single person as an individual, whatever the color of their skin, created in the image of God. That's a Christian concept. And in fact, it was a Christian empire, Great Britain, that abolished slavery to begin with. The idea that we should eliminate child sacrifice. What did the Christian settlers find when they came to the New World? They found a lot of civilizations that were murdering babies in weird religious rituals. It was Christianity that said we don't kill children just because they're somehow inconvenient to people. A lot of the things, human rights, the very idea that human beings have rights are a Christian concept. And so I'd ask you, my assumption based on the question is that you're skeptical of Christianity, or at least of certain public professions of Christianity. One of my favorite Bible verses is, "By your fruits ye shall know them." And I think that the fruits of the Christian faith are the most moral, the most just, and the most prosperous civilization in history. I make no apologies for believing that Christianity is the pathway to God. I make no apologies for thinking that Christian values are an important foundation of this country, but I'm not going to force you to believe in anything, because that's not what God wants, and that's not what I want either.
So
Go ahead.
For the school system, do you agree that there should be Christian implementation, or do you think that school system should be neutral and be focused on science, literature, reading, writing, arithmetic?
Well, I reject the idea that anything is purely neutral. Okay, there are, for example, let's take a basic scientific fact, and this is a little spicy. I'm not trying to make this too controversial, but take the basic scientific fact of, can you take a pill to change your biological gender? Okay? Now that's something that 15 years ago, quite literally, every single scientist in the Western world would have said, absolutely not, that's crazy, and now people will. I think the premise of your question, I don't totally share it, because I don't think perfect neutrality is possible. What is it? You talk about history. Was Christopher Columbus a great explorer, or was he a guy who committed genocide against the native populations? These debates, I'm happy to have them, but I reject the idea that there are truly neutral debates. Anybody who's telling you their view is neutral likely has an agenda to sell you, and I'm at least honest about the fact that I think the Christian foundation of this country is a good thing. Next.
Okay, thank you. And
Thank you.
for the pill you're talking about, what do you mean specifically? Are you talking about testosterone, estrogen?
Yeah, I'm talking about hormone replacement therapy. That's what I'm talking about. Just to be respectful, let's keep it going.
Yes, thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Hello, Mr. Vice President. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity to talk here today. I did not agree with many of the things that you said right ahead of this, but I don't think that's my point to discuss here. What I want to ask is,
Okay.
You are married to a woman who is not Christian. In her Wikipedia, I just looked that up. I wanted to know what her faith was. I didn't know this before. But she still calls herself Hindu. You are raising three kids in cultural, racial, religious household. How are you maintaining, or how are you teaching your kids not to keep your religion ahead of their mother's religion? Or how are you teaching them that your kind, they're that kind who got here just few years or few decades ago, is different or is better than your mom's kind who got here just a generation before? How are you balancing that? And when you talk about too many immigrants here, when did you guys decide that number? Why did you sell us a dream? You made us spend our youth, our wealth in this country and gave us a dream. You don't owe us anything. We have worked hard for it. Then how can you, as a vice president, stand there and say that we have too many of them now and we are going to take them out to people who are here rightfully so by paying the money that you guys asked us? You gave us the path, and now how can you stop it and tell us we don't belong here anymore? And one more thing. One more thing.
Sure.
Do you have to
There's
be...
a lot there. I don't know if I'm going to remember all this, but I will try.
I'm sorry. I had to say all of this, and please take it with due... I'm saying all of
course.
this with due respect.
Go ahead. Please.
I have no intention of causing a scene here or anything, but...
We're not close to causing a scene.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
But we talked about Christianity, all of this. I'm not even Christian, and I'm here standing to show support. Why are we making Christianity one of the major things that you have to have in common to be one of you guys, to show that I love America just as much as you do? Why is that still a question? Why do I have to be a Christian?
Okay. So there was a lot there, and I'm going to try to respond to as much of it as I can. So on the question of immigration, so first of all, I can believe that we should have lower immigration levels, but if the United States passed a law and made a promise to somebody, the United States, of course, has to honor that promise. Nobody's talking about that. I'm talking about people who came in violation of the laws of the United States of America, and I'm talking about in the future reducing the number of people. Sorry, what?
May I continue on that? Because when you just said you are not stopping with the people who came here legally, right? But you are pushing out policies that hurt us. And these policies are not even solving the problems. These policies are just creating chaos.
Ma'am. Okay, so again, I'm gonna finish answering the question, and then if I've answered all 9 of your questions in less than 15 minutes, then we can keep on going. We got to have a little fun, right? So here's the thing. I can believe that the United States should lower its levels of immigration in the future, while also respecting that there are people who have come here through lawful immigration pathways that have contributed to the country. But just because one person or 10 people or 100 people came in legally and contributed to the United States of America, does that mean that we're thereby committed to let in 1 million or 10 million or 100 million people a year in the future? No, that's not right. We cannot have, I'll go and finish, we cannot have an immigration policy where what was good for the country 50 or 60 years ago binds the country inevitably for the future. There's too many people who want to come to the United States of America, and my job as vice president is not to look out for the interests of the whole world, it's to look out for the people of the United States. Now, you asked a personal question about our interfaith household. And yes, my wife did not grow up Christian. I think it's fair to say that she grew up in a Hindu family, but not a particularly religious family in either direction. In fact, when I met my wife, we were both, I would consider myself an agnostic or an atheist, and that's what I think she would have considered herself as well. You know, everybody has to come to their own arrangement here. The way that we've come to our arrangement is she's my best friend. We talk to each other about this stuff. So we decided to raise our kids Christian. Our 2 oldest kids who go to school, they go to a Christian school. Our 8-year-old did his first communion about a year ago. That's the way that we have come to our arrangement. But, thank you. My 8-year-old was also very proud of his first communion. Thank you, guys. I'll tell him that Old Miss wishes him the best. But I think everybody has to have this own conversation when you're in a marriage. I mean, it's true for friends of mine who are in Protestant and Catholic marriages, friends of mine who are in, atheist and Christian marriages. You just got to talk to the only advice I can give is you just got to talk to the person that God has put you with, and you've got to make those decisions as a family unit. For us, it works out. Now, most Sundays, Usha will come with me to church. As I've told her, and I've said publicly, and I'll say now in front of 10,000 of my closest friends, do I hope eventually that she is somehow moved by the same thing that I was moved in by church? Yeah, I honestly do wish that, because I believe in the Christian gospel, and I hope eventually my wife comes to see it the same way. But if she doesn't, then God says everybody has free will, and so that doesn't cause a problem for me. That's something you work out with your friends, with your family, with the person that you love. Again, one of the most important Christian principles is that you respect free will. Usha's closer to the priests who baptized me than maybe I am. They talk about this stuff. My attitude is you figure this stuff out as a family, and you trust in God to have a plan, and you try to follow it as best as you can. And that's what I try to do. I want to make a final point. So I don't want to cut you off. I want to be respectful to all the people behind you in line. But I want to make this point about immigration, okay? If you ask the question, what is the exact right number of immigrants for the United States to let in, it is just very specific on the context. If you go back to the 1920s, the United States passed an Immigration Reform Act that effectively cut down immigration to close to zero for 40 years in this country. And what happened over those 40 years? The many, many people who had come from many different foreign countries and different foreign cultures, they assimilated into American culture. And there was an expectation that they would assimilate into American culture. I think we have 2 problems in our immigration system today. And my guess is you're probably a slightly more leftist political persuasion, liberal political persuasion, maybe not. But here's the thing. I remember back in my establishment GOP days, when I was still very early getting involved in Republican politics, I remember a conservative think tank person who told me that one of the reasons why immigration was really good is that if you had enough diversity in a country, people would mistrust each other and they wouldn't join labor unions. Okay? So when I see a lot of left-wing people who theoretically support organized labor saying we need to flood the country with a limitless number of immigrants, they're unwilling to set any limitations on it. My response to that is you are destroying the very social trust on which American freedom and prosperity was built. And that is really important to me. So the honest answer to your question, what is the exact number of immigrants America should accept in the future? Right now, the answer is far less than we've been accepting. We have got to become a common community again, and you can't do that when you have such high numbers of immigration, which is one of the reasons why we have the immigration policy we do. Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Vice President Vance. I just want to say it's an honor to actually be able to talk to you.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. One of my biggest questions is, I feel like one of the biggest problems that America is facing today is that ever-growing social political divide, and we're seeing this on the Republican and Democratic side. But we've seen that a refusal to cooperate with the other side has led to some major issues, including right now the government shutdown. And I wonder, as the party in power, what are your plans to address that issue towards, reaching that olive branch out to the other side to actually come to an agreement on how to go forward with our government?
Look, it's a very good question. And let me just say on the government shutdown in particular, the reality here is that there's a very simple bill that just reopens the government. It does it through pretty much the end of the year. That got every single Republican in the House of Representatives to support it. And then it got 52 Republicans in the Senate and 3 Democrats in the Senate to support it. But because of weird Senate procedural rules, it requires a 60-vote threshold. So on that issue in particular, when you have every single Republican with like 2 exceptions in both houses of Congress, I feel pretty confident. I know that I'm partisan. I know I have an R next to my name. But I feel pretty damn good saying the shutdown is the Democrats' fault because we voted again and again to open it. Now, but there's a broader question there, and I think most Americans, whatever their political persuasion, would actually like the country's political parties to work together better to solve the problems. And look, and I agree with that. And my approach when I was in the United States Senate was to try to find some issues where we could agree with the other side on and try to work with them on it. And let me give you one example. I really worry about concentration in the corporate sector. I worry about big corporate monopolies. I worry that when you have only 1 or 2 companies dominating an entire sector, it's bad for liberty and it's bad for prosperity. So you may be shocked to hear this, but I actually worked with Elizabeth Warren on some anti-monopoly stuff when I was in the United States Senate. But here's the problem. The problem is there is actually a lot of things where we could work across the aisle. There are a lot of President Trump is in my view, you haven't seen organized labor ever get behind a Republican at least in 100 years like they have behind Donald J. Trump. There are a lot of areas of common ground on that question. The problem is, as reasonable as some of these people can be in private, in public, the current obsession of the Democratic Party in leadership, I'm not saying every Democrat in the country, but the current obsession of every Democrat in Congress is get President Trump, fight President Trump, attack President Trump. It is impossible for us to work across the aisle unless a person is willing to put down their partisan sword, shut the hell up about fake scandals related to Donald Trump, and actually work with us. That's the way you make this happen. Next.